Okay, we are live. Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Robin Lewis, and you are with us here for the Monday, March 3rd meeting of the Land Use and Ethics Subcommittee of Environment and Transportation. We will kick off our meeting with our agenda. This evening, we're going to discuss House Bill 932, Public Ethics, Conflicts of Interest and Blind Trust Governor. We're going to discuss House Bill 230, Public Ethics Training and Financial Disclosure Requirements Revisions. And finally, we'll discuss House Bill 785, Common Ownership Communities and Zoning Authorities, Operation of Family Child Care Homes Limitations. So let's go ahead and get started with House Bill 932. Jared, could you pull up we're looking at the bill, I believe, right, Patrick? There's no reprint, because there were no
Yeah, there's an amendment
significant
and you
amendments.
should have it.
Okay. Yes, please. Okay, we'll get that pulled up for everybody. And this was a bill originally scheduled to be discussed last week, February 25th, but we weren't able to get to it. We ran out of time, so we'll take it up today. We go
Okay.
great. And if you blow that up for all of the myopic and presbyopic participants, be great. Okay. Patrick, would you be so kind and walk us through and blow that up, please, Jared? You might be able to use the roller on your mouse. No, you could also just try stretching it out with your fingers on the screen. That looks pretty good. All right, Patrick, would you be so kind and talk us through this?
Yeah, this is the blind trust bill. It requires governor within 6 months after taking the oath of office to place all the appropriate interests into a blind trust and divest of any interest that the Ethics Commission determines is necessary for divestiture to resolve a likely or potential conflict of interest. The bill also recognizes that under Ethics Commission regulations, there are certain things that don't belong in a blind trust. And it requires the governor to sign a non-participation agreement on any matter that would involve that interest. The Ethics Commission would adopt regulations that would identify what would be the type of thing that wouldn't be included in a blind trust and subject to a non-participation agreement. Those would include, what would that be? We'll get to that. But then it also requires that any corporations of which the governor owns a certain interest, or a restricted individual, which is basically people close to the governor, spouses and children and the like, would have to, if the business seeks a state grant or a competitive contract, to report to the Ethics Commission any interest held in the entity by the governor. Further, oh yeah, the types of interests that could be kept out of a blind trust include closely held corporation or family business, interests that are not readily marketable, some that have an impact that's unique to the governor, like in our particular current governor's case, royalties from a book contract, and interests that are subject to restrictions and encumbrances. And then the amendment just establishes a penalty for a $5,000 penalty for the governor if he violates the provisions. You can go to the bottom and see that, towards the bottom at least. But we could go down the document.
Can you hear Patrick speaking, Jared? He wants us to scroll down to the bottom of the document,
Towards the bottom, not the very
towards the
bottom.
bottom.
Okay, go up a little bit, slowly, slowly. Maybe a little bit higher. All right, no, go down, go down, go down. Slowly, one more. Another more. Keep going. Is this just the bill?
Yes, it's the bill. Did you want to see? This is just the straight bill. Was there another document we should be looking at?
I sent the reprint in.
Jared, can you please turn on your volume so that you can hear Patrick speaking? He says he sent a reprint. Okay, so we always want to look at the reprint because that's always the latest and greatest. And be sure you have your volume up so you can hear him. All right, thank you. So we'll pull up the reprint, everybody.
I think some people have their hands up. We could probably go to questions while.
Good idea. I'm just going to go in the order that I see. I see Delegate Terrassa, then Davis, then Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just skip me and come back to me?
Okay,
Thanks.
we'll go to Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Patrick, for sending us the bill to have a look at. I have one question for Dia Daly, and that is, does this bill, as written with the amendments, cover what happened and what we think might happen? And if it's fine with Dia, I'd like to move the bill.
Thank you,
Yes.
Delegate. Dia, can you answer her questions, please?
The bill would basically, with the former governor, there were assets that were not appropriate for a blind trust. You know, you can't put your family business in a blind trust. The issue you may have encountered is if he had some sort of agreement that said he wasn't going to participate in certain things, you didn't know about that. That was confidential. So this bill would say a governor who has a family business, he or she is going to have a non-participation agreement, and that's going to be a public agreement. I think copies go to the Board of Public Works. I'll get a copy, the presiding officers get a copy. So you have that accountability there.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Davis?
Yes, and thank you, Dia. I move the bill.
Thank you, Delegate. The bill has been, well, we have to move the amendments, but would it be okay if we
I
take
just sent in another reprint to your delegate address, Madam Chair.
Okey doke. Okay, we'll get that pulled up. And while Jared is pulling up the latest reprint, we'll just hold on Delegate Davis's motion so that I can ask Delegate Long and then Delegate Lehman, because there's an amended version. We need to look at the amendments before we move the bill, I think. Delegate Long, please.
Yes, seconding the motion.
Okay. Delegate, thank you. So I'm assuming you're moving the amendments.
I believe that's what my good colleague meant.
Okay. So the amendments have been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, is there any discussion? Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back to the issue of the penalty. This is a question for Dia Daly. Is that standard language, the misdemeanor, but up to a year in jail?
So,
Like
interest,
standard for other ethics laws?
so interestingly, the Ethics Commission has the authority to fine lobbyists, and a lobbyist who violates the lobbying law would be subject to a year in jail. So this copies that language. Currently, the Ethics Commission, they could impose a late fee on, let's say I violate the ethics law. They could impose a late fee because I didn't file my financial disclosure statement. But if they wanted to fine me, they would have to go to circuit court and ask the judge to impose a fine. So this is consistent with lobbyists, but it's new for officials.
Okay, on the fine piece, but what about the jail part of it?
That language comes directly from the lobbying language.
It does. Okay.
We are
That's
not
what I
fans
want-
of recreating things here.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dia. And thank you, Dia, Ms. Daly, and all your team for being patient and coming back this week. All right, so the amendments have been properly moved and seconded and voted unanimous. Is there any further discussion?
Move the bill. I was going to move the bill.
Okay, thank you. The
Second.
bill's been moved and seconded. The bill's been properly moved and seconded. Is all in favor? The bill is amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 Great, thanks, everybody. So House Bill 932, as amended, has passed subcommittee. We'll go to our next bill, and that would be House Bill 230. Now, I believe, if I remember right, we are looking at House Bill 230. That's the ethics law, training, and disclosure as amended. Patrick, can you walk us? There were some amendments. Can you walk us through this, Patrick?
Yeah, this is a fairly straightforward bill. Occasionally we'll get this from the Ethics Commission, sort of a cleanup bill. They alter their training programs by authorizing online or live presentation, and the bill repeals the requirement that it run at least 2 hours. And then there's a typo that's corrected, but then they expand a little bit for the financial disclosure, the reporting of, instead of place of salaried employment, it's reworded to be source of compensated employment, which expands the application a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Is there any discussion?
There is no amendment offered on this bill, but there was an amendment put on the Senate bill that sort of just narrowed the scope of the training course on conflict of interest, financial disclosure, and relevant administrative and other applicable requirements of the ethics law.
Right, and that was Senate Bill, the cross file is Senate Bill 251. Yes, Delegate Long.
I wanted to ask Dia's perspective on the Senate crossfile. I'm looking at the bill. I've read it already. I'm not sure if my other colleagues have. So I wanted to first ask, number one, Dia's perspective on the amendment to the Senate bill. And with that, I was going to move the bill.
If you don't mind, I'd like to defer to Jennifer Algar, Executive Director of the Ethics Commission, to since it's their bill.
Okay,
I'll
Ms.
defer to them if you don't
Algar.
mind.
Ms. Algar, you can unmute.
Okay, let's see.
Yes, I'm here in front of my television, listening to the maneuvers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Jennifer Algar, Executive Director with the State Ethics Commission. The amendment on the Senate side, I think, was offered because the State Ethics Commission was requesting the removal of the 2-hour requirement. This was just to expand the language and ensure that the State Ethics Commission is still covering all of the required topics in the training to include relevant conflict of interest, financial disclosure provisions, other relevant administrative provisions and other information that would be applicable. So you have my word, the State Ethics Commission would cover everything that's required, in those trainings. We just wanted to remove the 2-hour requirement. Now that we are doing this online, we're finding that it's a more efficient vehicle for the training.
Thank you. Does it
If I
answer?
may,
Yes,
just for
yes.
follow up. So if I'm understanding, you are the Senate amendments are palatable for you.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Delegate Long. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I move the bill with the Senate amendments.
Thank you, Delegate Long.
I second the amendment.
Thank you. The amended bill's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Great. So the amended House Bill 230 has passed. It's amended to adopt all of the changes that were in the Senate Bill 251, Patrick. So we can harmonize our House version with the Senate version, okay? Wonderful.
Correct.
Very efficient. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, members. And thank you to the Ethics Commission folks. You can stay if you like, but we finished with our ethics bills. Thank you. We're going to move now to House Bill 785. That's the Common Ownership Communities Childcare Bill. And this would be Ben who will walk us through. Ben, would you take the steering wheel and walk us through? And Jared.
Okay, Chair Lewis, I will share my screen with the amendment, if that works.
Thanks, Ben. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the title of this bill is Common Ownership Communities and Zoning Authorities, Operation of Family Childcare Homes Limitations. There's no fiscal impact. There's a local mandate, and the fiscal note also cites information provided from MACO that's stating that MACO advised that the bill has a negative operational impact on local governments and notes that by preempting county authority to set capacity limitations at family childcare homes, counties may be unable to enforce certain regulations about health and safety and road capacity. And there is an amendment from MACO in this regard. So this bill is for each common ownership community type, that's HOAs, condos, and cooperatives. The bill prohibits the governing documents of a common ownership community from prohibiting or restricting the establishment and operation of a child care home, and also the use of the roads, sidewalks, and other common elements of the common ownership community by users of the child care home. A couple of terms: the family child care home is a residence in which family child care is provided for up to 8 children, and a large family child care home is a residence in which family child care is for at least 9 children, but not more than 12. Let's see, I can go through the bill a little bit. Basically, let's see here. Here's your definitions. It's prohibiting limitations on the number of children for which a family child care home or a large family child care home provides family child care. The only qualifier is that I think the subcommittee may have heard this bill last year. The change is that this one, it doesn't apply if there's age restricted housing. And there's under current law for condominiums and HOAs, but now also for cooperatives. Let's see, they may include there are restrictions they can include that require the child care providers to pay on a pro bono or a pro rata basis the total number of family child care homes or large family child care homes that are in the community, any increase in insurance costs, and then also a fee for the use of common elements in a reasonable amount that is not going to exceed $50 per year on each family child care home that's registered there. And then they also are required to notify the cooperative housing corporation prior to opening a family childcare home. And a couple of final notes. Let's see, the bill establishes that the child care provider in a common ownership community must obtain liability insurance. And then they also may not operate without such insurance. The sponsor, there's an amendment from MACO, which is down here where it relates to the type, these are the mentioned earlier, how a local jurisdiction cannot limit the number of children for which a family childcare home below what is authorized by the State Department of Education. This is the MACO amendment that was distributed before the hearing or before the work session. And that's saying that they can limit it if there are necessary considerations in a specific finding that it would create an undue impact on the health or safety of the surrounding area. I do want to note, I asked the sponsor about this. They were opposed to this. They were saying that it was, there's fairly extensive licensing processes already designed for health and safety. And they were not convinced that this would be a particular threat to health and safety. And when they were also concerned about when the county is going to be making that finding and see. So that's the last point. And then the other last point is maybe looking at the language here about this kind of like broad authority for the common areas. It says that, there's a provision in the Articles of Incorporation may not prohibit or restrict the use of the road, sidewalks, and other common elements. I think that was discussed last year with the subcommittee about concerns about that being too broad. So that's, yeah.
Great, thank you, Ben. I see some hands up. First I saw Delegate Davis, then Delegate Terrasa. Delegate Davis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben, is there a limit for large family daycares? I know it starts at 9, but is there a limit? Can there be 15? Or?
Thank you, Delegate Davis. So I'm looking at the definition here. The large family childcare home, it's not more than 12 children.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Terrasa.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand, I guess what Mako is trying to get at this, but I guess I would like to hear like how this like where in the process would this decision get made? What would that look like?
Who's best to answer that?
Chair Lewis, if I may.
Yes, please, Ben. Thank you.
Okay, I believe Mr. Butchko is in the meeting if you want to call on them.
Yes, I see him. Hi, Mr. Butchko, why don't you go ahead? Thank you, and clarify the delegate's question.
Yes, so thank you very much and good evening to my favorite subcommittee in the entire General Assembly. I do have to say, actually talking it out with the advocates, and I see Ellie is on the call as well, I think her and I have actually come up with an amendment that satisfies MACO's concerns in addition to the childcare industry's concerns. Ellie, do you want to kind of go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks, Dom. So, as was mentioned earlier, this is one of the most regulated industries in the state. And so within COMAR, there are already requirements that, for inspections and for licensing of family childcare that speak to the concerns that MACO has, for fire safety, for access to, toilets, water, any of those types of things. That's already very heavily regulated by the department. So they already come in, they do inspections before you can get a license. And that's found in, it's in COMAR 13A 15.13, and then also in 13A 18, which is the large family childcare homes section. So there's two different, there's this regular family childcare homes, which is up to 8 children. than the large family childcare, which is up to 12, as was just mentioned. So the number of children allowed is already capped, and there's certain ratios as well for the number of children to providers. And then in addition to that, we already have compliance required with all local, state, and local and state fire regulations, and a number of other safety issues that are already covered through the regulation. So as I said, as Dom and I had talked sort of offline, and that if perhaps if those parts of COMAR are directly referenced, that could satisfy the concerns that MACO has.
Yeah, as long as those sections of COMAR, because Ellie shared those with me, I reviewed them. They are incredibly extensive. As long as they're referenced in this and they're not being intentionally overridden by this, I think we're happy to kind of drop our amendment and go with the one we just described.
I think you're muted, Chair Lewis.
I was dropping pearls of wisdom and you guys missed it.
Isn't that how it always happens?
Thank you. So Delegate Terrasa had asked a question. I think it was Terrasa. Was your question answered?
So I think if I understand this correctly, my question is answered by that amendment being withdrawn, and then there's a separate amendment that's going to be put in that just makes reference to existing COMAR regulations. If I understand that correctly, then
Correct.
I guess my question about how this process would work is moot because they're not going to have that section. So
Ben? Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Just real quick on that point that Delegate Terrasa mentioned and has been discussed just now, and I'm just asking, are we sure we need to be citing COMAR if that's just the existing regulations that these family child care homes are subject to?
I mean, I would defer to you all on that and to what makes what would make MACO feel comfortable. Whether or not it's put in there, those COMAR regulations are being abided by. But I understand that sometimes putting a fine point on something can also be helpful. So I would defer on that point, but just knowing that is already happening very extensively. And I see Ruby Daniels from the Maryland State Family Child Care Association is here, and she can absolutely attest to how stringent some of these the regulatory process is.
Thank you. So one of our norms on our committee is that we'll call on a guest to answer questions specifically. So I'm glad we have a full complement of experts here. And Ben, you just asked a question. So your advice would be welcome. Do we need to reference COMAR here? Or can you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that input, additional input. I'm not particularly inclined to be adding it if it sounds like there's been no issues with that and that's strictly adhered to and is
Okay, it doesn't sound necessary. So Delegate Terrasa, can we close the book on your question?
Well, yes, but now I have a further question because I thought that the issue was that MACO was comfortable removing this part, the C here, if there is a specific cross-reference. I'm not sure I understand the need for a specific cross-reference, but if that's important to the subcommittee in terms of MACO being comfortable, then I think the question is probably for them.
Okay, why don't we do this? I see Delegate Naraki's hand has been up for quite a few minutes, and I want to give him a chance to ask a question. So Delegate Naraki, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for not having my camera on. I'm driving to Annapolis at the moment, so I apologize for that. But I swear it is me here. So I do have two questions. I think one is just a clarifying question for Ben. Ben, as I understood, one of the things that you said was that age-restricted communities can, in fact, I guess I'm trying to word this properly, maybe have a prohibition in place. I have a very large retirement community in my district, so that's why I'm asking that particular question.
Ben?
That's correct, Delegate Naraki. There is the bill does not apply to age-restricted communities.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben. And my my second question, and this may be for Ben, or I'm not sure, Madam Chair, who the appropriate person is, but I don't believe that all common areas in a community are created equally. And what I mean by that is I think that swimming pools, gymnasiums, and in fact, I have some communities that actually have common boat slips in them in my district. I'm not sure that it is a good idea to just sort of give a daycare in a community sort of unfettered access to some of these kinds of areas, that really could are potentially dangerous and could really drive up liability costs for the community as a whole. So I have strong concerns with just kind of allowing that to be the case in kind of areas like that. And it seems, Ben, if I'm hearing it correctly, that would be the case with the bill as drafted currently.
Ben, can you try to clarify, please? Because I don't think that's implied.
I believe so, Chair Lewis. So here's this is for the common owner. This is from the Cooperative Housing Corporation section, but it's for all of them. A provision in the articles of incorporation or a proprietary lease or a provision of the bylaws may not prohibit or restrict the establishment of a family child care home or the use of roads, sidewalks, and then it says and other common elements. So that's kind of, I believe that's what Delegate Naraki is referencing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that is my concern there, those kinds of common elements. I don't think those are the same as a sidewalk or a field or something like that in a community.
Okay. I'd like to turn to, I see the bill sponsor in the room, and I'm allowed to call on the bill sponsor. I invited her, and I'd like her to weigh in. She could have some good insight. Delegate Feldmark, are you able to speak to this question?
Yes,
Delegate
yes,
Naraki?
thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I apologize for joining you a few minutes late. But I do appreciate the delegate's question, and actually, I think we can work out a solution here. First of all, I think it's important to note, and some of the childcare experts on the line can help me out here. But the common areas, if the child care provider were going to use common areas, those common areas would have to actually be licensed for use, right? The child care provider would have to have them approved as if they're going to have the children using them. And so those types of facilities would not be necessary. And so if the committee sees fit to carve those out, I think we can live with that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Terrasa. So let me make sure I understood you. You said that common areas, to use a common area, the childcare provider, those areas would have to be licensed for the childcare provider to use them.
Yes, and right, and so something like a gym or something like that, I think we can be comfortable excluding. I'm looking at Ms. Cowan if she can nod, or Ms. Daniels, if I can get a nod of approval there. Yes, okay.
I'll call on, in E&T, we kind of call on people, so.
Got it.
Trying to follow my new committee norms. So
okay.
Thank you, Delegate. All right, so what Delegate Feldmark has just mentioned is the option on the table to exclude those common areas that would have to be licensed for use. Example, a gym. So that's an option on the table for the subcommittee. Delegate Naraki's hand is down, but since he raised the question about that, Delegate Naraki, if you were able to jump in, would that resolve your concern?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think if you were to exclude some of those sort of what I would kind of characterize as areas that could be high liability, frankly, for a common ownership community, then I think that would resolve my concerns with the bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Delegate. So Ben, let's just make note that the option on the table is to exclude those common areas that would be high liability. And we can keep talking through that. I think let's try to be very succinct here with our questions so that we can move through this important bill. I see Delegate Terrasa and then Delegate Lehman. Delegate Terrasa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So really quickly, I appreciate Delegate Naraki's concern and the sponsor's willingness to do that. I don't know that we need to take out those areas that are unsafe for children, because my understanding is that would be taken care of in any licensing licensing process. And it would make me nervous that they might exclude like, a playground or something like that. And I think that's the fact that we're going to have kids there and it might be unsafe is part of a licensing process. I mean, that's their expertise.
Okay, great. Thank you, Delegate Terrasa. Delegate Lehman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't remember if I brought this up last year, but to the point about high-risk areas, if someone mentioned it, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, and I'm not entirely focused on everything every minute of this conversation. But we had a situation in my neighborhood, a tragic story of a licensed daycare provider bringing a large group of kids to our community swimming pool. And she had, she met the requirements. She was licensed, met the requirements for staffing. It was a group of, maybe 10 kids, young enough, not all of them, like a few toddlers and some small school age kids, but brought them to the community swimming pool, and one of them drowned in the baby pool because, and it was, it was a horrible situation. It was no one's fault per se, but her helper went into the restroom with like 2 of the kids, which left the woman who owned the daycare with like about, 8 kids. And she didn't notice that this one little boy had flipped upside down in his floating device. And he was so little that the device trapped him down, where he was beneath the floaty, ring under the water. And he died. And so, I agree with Delegate Terrasa, and I can appreciate her concern about, keeping kids out of certain areas, but I just wonder if there's a way, I'm not suggesting that, but that to recognize that, if there are rules, I don't know if community pools tend to have these rules around, you'll see rules around parents being required to accompany children under a certain age, but I don't know if they go so far, Delegate Feldmark, as to typically get into the ratio and the number of adults per like larger groups of kids. But to the degree those rules exist, I think, we should recognize that they're there for a reason. I don't know how to suggest you do that, but I would agree with Delegate Terrasa. It would not be my suggestion to say that would be off limits, but to just acknowledge that there might be rules around that a daycare provider would have to abide by. So that's all, just a comment, suggestion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Lehman. I see Delegate Davis's hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With all of these issues, I would feel more comfortable if it was limited to small daycares. I wonder if there's any appetite.
Hard to hear her.
Delegate Davis, could you turn your volume up just a little bit? And repeat your statement?
With all of these concerns, I'd feel more comfortable if we limited it to small daycares.
And the definition of small daycare, Ben, is what number limit of children are we talking?
Up to 8.
Up to 8? Okay. 8 or fewer kids. All right. I have a quick question for Mr. Butchko at MACO, because it was MACO that had raised the concerns about health and safety. So could you help us get a little clearer here? Because I feel like we're coming in the finish line on this bill, and it would be really great to come to a conclusion here. So Mr. Butchko, can you weigh in on the issue of common areas and health and safety and daycare size? What would MACO perspective be?
Yeah, so again, looking through the licensure requirements and going through with Ellie some of the finer points, I think so long as those two sections of COMAR, which kind of govern those licensure, as long as they're not inadvertently overridden by this or they're not touched by this, from a county perspective, I think this is we'd be good. We would have no other reason to go in and limit or potentially kind of touch a family childcare home like this. So again, as long as those two sections of COMAR remain, our concerns are handled.
Thank you. So Ben, could you please clarify for me as a non-lawyer? Mr. Butchko just said that as long as the COMAR regulations are not overridden by this provision here in the bill, that would be a comfortable landing place. Can you please weigh in, Ben?
Yes, this bill, I'm unaware of any preemption or overriding of COMAR. It's just what's going on in the bill is the overriding of the restrictions of these common ownership communities to have the childcare homes, but it's not making any changes to the existing protections.
Okay.
COMAR, so.
Thank you. So, Mr. Butchko, this bill it's not preemptive and it's not overriding anything in COMAR. It's just releasing the restrictions on childcare providers, childcare homes. So, and then there's a question that Delegate Davis raised about the size of the childcare limit. That's, the top, 8 kids or less. Mr. Butchko, did you have any perspectives on that? It doesn't sound like you do.
No, not a ton, because again, some of these are incredibly detailed. And so, I mean, they look at fire code, they look at building code. So a lot of the stuff that we would want to consider as far as limiting the number of children, that is something they would have to clear in order to get their license. So anything that would kind of throw up a red flag for us does appear to be covered in the licensure requirements.
Great. So the licensure requirements cover the red flags that you had. Thank you. And thank you, Ben. Delegate Holmes, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering about insurance. Do the daycare centers have to co-insure with the master policy of the common ownership community in case something goes awry? So that if something does go awry, someone can file a lawsuit against the daycare center and then against the common ownership community. And if there's no co-insured there probably is an opportunity for double, triple lawsuits. I don't understand daycare centers at all, to tell you the truth. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's a good question. It hasn't come up yet this evening. I don't know if it came up last year, but who is best to answer that Delegate Holmes' questions about it at coinsurance? Whoever is best to answer that. Nobody here?
I can flag the insurance provisions, Chair
Would
Lewis.
you please? Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me show the screen here.
Is there anything you can't do, Ben?
It's okay. Appreciate it. Okay, so here's an example using the Cooperative Housing Corporation. This is what they can do. The cooperative may include a provision that requires the family child care providers to pay on a pro rata basis based on the total number of family child care homes or large family child care homes, any increase in insurance costs of the Cooperative Housing Corporation that are solely and directly attributable to the operation of family child care homes or large family child care homes. And then there's a second part here where the Cooperative Housing Corporation, a family child care provider, can be required to or shall obtain the liability insurance described under sections 19106 and 19203 of the insurance article. in at least the minimum amounts described.
So it sounds like the cooperative can require residents to get liability insurance.
I'm not sure about exactly the thrust of Chair Holmes's question, but that's kind of what's going on with insurance in the bill as currently introduced.
Delegate Holmes, does this answer your question?
It kind of does. The co-insured part is not laid out there. But it does indicate that the licensed daycare center, whether large or small, has to go through the licensing process and have to get insurance, yes, but it just still doesn't answer that particular question. So I'll listen and just pay attention to others as they speak, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we still have something to clarify a little bit more, Delegate Holmes' question about whether, I guess that's in law what you would call being liable individually and severally. Someone could sue the childcare provider as well as the cooperative if there's a problem. Okay, well, let's hold that. I see Delegate Terrassa and then Delegate Davis, and I feel like we're getting closer to the finish line here. Some clarifying questions. Delegate Terrassa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to the issue of child safety again with water. Long story short, I started my career partly because of a drowning issue, but that's for another day. But what I would say is that I think those are changes that maybe we should be looking at, but not here. Like that would be in the licensing requirements. Because I do very much share those concerns about children's safety near water. But I also don't think it has anything to do with the size of the daycare because, well, it does, but if small is 8 and under, that's still too many kids in my mind, but not in this committee. But I still think having 8 kids at the pool by yourself is a lot, just not us.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Davis and then Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a follow-up question for Dominic. He mentioned that most of the rules and regulations were covered in the code. So my question is common ownership, I mean, this is something new, is common ownership and common facilities, is that already addressed in the code?
So I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question. I could definitely take a look and follow up. I know we have some folks from the actual industry here who are probably better placed to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Davis, I'm just going to ask someone who's better placed. Would that be Ms. Cohen? Okay, go ahead, unmute yourself and answer Delegate's question.
Sure. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that again? I want to make sure that I'm answering it exactly.
Delegate Davis?
Mako mentioned that they're fine with the bill as is because the code addresses daycares and they're all kind of safety
right.
Parameters already in the code. And my question is, does the code address common ownership, the sharing of common ownership facilities?
So there's a number of different requirements within the code, including, essentially common ownership would be daycare facilities. It would be, and I think, we talked with the sponsor and a number of the common, such as the gym, things like that they would be precluded from use already because of the licensing. So if there were a playground, that would have to be part already of the regular licensing procedures where the Department of Education would come, the licensing person would come, do their inspection. They always do in-person inspections for the initial licensing and then regularly, as the daycare operates. So, if there's a playground like, Delegate Terrassa mentioned, that would be part of the inspection. So everything would have to be up to the regulations and requirements of the code, of the licensing code and licensing regulations in the same way that it would if it were in a backyard. Same goes for the swimming pools. Swimming pools are very highly regulated within that, and I'm absolutely devastated to hear that story that you shared. And unfortunately, that's something that does and can happen in lots of different scenarios. Or what? I'm sorry, was that? Yes, Delegate Lehman. I'm sorry, but still, these are all things that are already taken into consideration for the safety of children writ large, whether you're a large family childcare, whether you're a childcare center, whether you are, you have 3 kids in a family childcare. I'm happy to share with the committee the regulations that really, which I shared with Dom this evening, that you can really see how seriously they take each and every single part aspect of this licensing process to ensure that the safety of the children is paramount. And again, I think it bears repeating that this is not just a one-time inspection. This is something that the department regularly has to do, and that providers have to regularly maintain, their licensure. So any little changes are able to, any changes are able to be, addressed by, or violations or anything of that nature are regularly looked at by the agency. I think that within the regulations that are already there, you already have a wide breadth of safety considerations and requirements that would not be precluded by common ownership.
Delegate Davis, does that answer your question?
Yes, I have. Yes. Can I ask another one, Madam Chair?
Please go ahead.
Would it regulate them going to the pool with other people? Is that something in the code?
I'm sorry, Delegate Davis, regulate the children going to the pool?
With others, yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Like with the other people in the condo?
Like a friend?
I'm sorry, yeah, I just want to clarify.
With the common ownership, people that have a right to be there, other people who live in the common ownership place?
That would be, I believe that would be okay. Actually, Ruby Daniels, who's here from the state, the Family Child Care Association might be able to answer that better. But
Okay.
even within, I would think that having other people at the pool would be something that the parents would, agree to as they're putting their children into care. But in the same way that if they did a field trip to a pool, it would be similar to that. But Ruby Daniels, if she's able, I think.
So Delegate Davis, would you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Are you fine?
Yes.
Okay, just for my own curiosity, Ms. Daniels, could you speak to the issue of children going to the pool that Delegate Davis raised?
Yes.
And be brief, please.
Thank you so much. They have licensing of very strict water rules. I don't have the ratio right in front of me, but it's a very strict rule nowadays. It's in the COMAR. So they have very strict water rules.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Daniels. So Delegate Davis, I think we closed the book on that, on your question. Delegate Naraki, and then I'd like to see if we can tie all these loose threads together. Delegate Naraki, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Holmes made me kind of think of something else. I think Delegate Holmes is on to something interesting there. The idea of co-insured, I'm wondering what happens in a community. I have a very large planned community that's being built right now that frankly probably won't be done for another 5 years, but has a lot of residents there already. It has not yet been turned over though to the common ownership community organization. So the developer is still managing that. I'm wondering if it's not expressly written in the law, if the developer would also have some liability in that case, since that community has not yet been fully turned over to a common ownership community. I know that I'm sure there are other communities like this around the state. I know Delegate Holmes has a lot of bills kind of dealing with these kinds of issues often. So I'm just kind of wondering what liability a developer may also have in this kind of circumstance.
Thank you, Delegate. Ben, that sounds like a Ben question.
Thank you. So I'm seeing pretty broad language. I'm not seeing any reference of developer or declarant specifically regarding the bill. However, as an example, there's a provision for the Cooperative Housing Corporation section that it's just saying a cooperative housing corporation may include, and it also says, that a cooperative housing corporation may not prohibit. So in that sense, it seems to be pretty broad.
So Ben, just to make sure that I get this, Delegate Naraki was referring to an example where there's an existing multifamily complex that is currently being managed by a developer, an entity, not a common ownership entity, but some private developer. Isn't that developer liable in some way through some provisions of insurance law, liable for what happens on the property that they're managing? That has nothing to do, it's not a common ownership, so it doesn't, common ownership, laws don't apply to it. What liability laws apply to the current situation that Delegate Naraki mentioned?
Yeah, I think Chair Holmes might also know a little bit about this too, but yeah, these provisions of the code, the corporations, the cooperative housing corporations, the HOA section, and the condo sections that are in the bill, that they are part of the larger like acts for each of those types of home ownership or housing type. Within that, they do talk about the declarant and the developer, but yeah, it seems possibly a gray area about whether, I mean, either way, right? It's the developer who has the childcare home, or it's this cooperative housing corporation. But either way, yeah, I don't think that would be like a loophole for liability, but about whether it's going to apply to the declarant before the formation of the official like condo or homeowners association, I'm not sure.
Okay, and is that the subject of this bill? The situation of some developer owning a property? Does that have anything to do with this bill? This bill is about common ownership. Okay, right? Am I correct? Okay, so we're not talking about developers running multifamily housing. We're talking about common ownership. So let's focus on
Madam Chair, if I may.
Subject
No,
matter of
it
the bill.
does though, Madam Chair, it does, because most of these communities, they don't get turned over to a common ownership community until they reach a certain threshold of development. Could be a threshold of units, a percentage, something like that. So it's sort of a phase of the common ownership community, for lack of a better way to describe it.
I see. Okay, this is a new area for me. Delegate Holmes, could you clarify this so we can close the book on this question, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as Ben indicated, and is suggested by Delegate Naraki, there is a transition period. When the declarant is in control, it has not yet been turned over to the board of directors. And in some cases, there are no citizen board of directors on the board at all. It's all controlled by the developer. Now, whether or not that has anything to do with the declarant's insurance policy to cover this, I'm not sure. I've never run into this when I was part of the declarant side of things. So I'm not sure what insurance the declarant would have to cover this, or if it's necessary. And when I say if it's necessary, because of what the education committees would do to ensure that the licensure is accurate. I don't know that.
Okay.
Because I don't know anything about daycare centers whatsoever and how this whole process works. So I'm not sure if there is a disconnect or not, Madam Chair.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Holmes. I see Delegate Terrassa, then Delegate Davis, and then we're going to come to some closure on this bill for this evening. So Delegate Terrassa, can you be brief, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that, and I understand what the Delegate Naraki and Holmes are talking about in terms of who owns the property for what period of time. But I think this is all outside the scope of this bill, like whether or not this is a tort law, and tort laws like many courses that you're going to take in law school if you want to understand the difference between whether the developer versus the community is responsible at any given moment in time on scale. And I think that's already taken care of in other parts of our law. I don't think that has to do with whether or not a daycare operates there. I mean, the same thing would happen if I had a child who was unfortunately injured on the facilities in a homeowners association. That piece of law is figured out and isn't part of this bill, in my
Thank
opinion.
you. So thank you for bringing us back to the subject matter of the bill, which is the reason we're all gathered together in the darkening evening of a Monday. Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Davis, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree wholeheartedly with Delegate Terrasa that that is not an issue in this bill.
So I think this is a wonderful moment where two lawyers are agreeing on something, and I feel like that's an omen. I feel like that is the opportunity. So you guys have been great. So what I'm hearing is a couple of things. I've heard that Mako is at peace so long as the health and safety issues are already, addressed in existing regulations. I hear there's not really a major concern about the size of the daycares, whether it's 8 or fewer, 8 or more. The same conditions apply. I heard some questions about insurance and co-insurance, but they are quite murky and really not the subject of this bill. And really, it sounds like the whole matter of licensing for daycare providers, it's already addressed. Or the licensing, use of common areas, that's already addressed in existing licensing law, if I'm understanding right. So I, as best I could, tried to touch on the questions you guys raised. It seems like there's really no real issues with this bill. There may be opportunities to work on other areas of the licensing code or health and safety codes, but those are not the subject of this bill. So it seems like—
Madam Chair, I'm willing to move the bill favorably if you're going to entertain a motion.
Yes, I was warming up to that and you read my mind. So the bill has been moved. Delegate Davis?
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. The bill's been properly moved and seconded. All those, and Ben, are we? Oh, I think we're disregarding Mako's amendments, but there were these two other amendments, number 1 and number 2. Ben, correct? Sorry, there's amendment number 1 still to consider. Are we?
In the amendment, the copy that was emailed out?
Yeah.
That's amendment 1 in the ID number 253825 is just a technical. It's really just, we're talking about that. We're talking
Changing the
about
world rule.
That's we're just talking about the Mako amendment is that piece of paper. Yeah.
Can we move them together, Ben?
If the so yes, it's one. It's I know it mentions amendment 1 and 2. That's still just part of like the same amendment. And
So I'll refer to it as a single amendment because it's on the same page. The two.
And doesn't include the Mako amendment, right?
that is the Mako amendment, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, but I thought that we decided that we didn't need the Mako amendment.
I thought we did too. Ben, can you please help us here?
That's my understanding as well. Yeah.
So is there something that's left that we need to vote on in terms of an amendment, the technical?
If I may, Chair Lewis.
Please.
Okay, so yeah, the Mako amendment that was emailed out, and that you saw the reprint of, that's the only official amendment that's been distributed to the subcommittee that I'm aware of. And my understanding on the Mako amendment is that the subcommittee is disregarding that amendment.
Disregarding it. Okay, thank you. I got a little lost in the sauce. So, colleagues, we are not considering any amendments. We're the bill as introduced has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
discussion at 7:08? Okay, the bill passes. I think that was unanimous. So thank you guys for being so diligent and curious and patient. That was the last bill on our agenda. So we've completed our work and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.